Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ashley Torr, and I am the project lead for culminating the top DEI insights from our founder and CEO, Pamela McIlvaine. On today's episode, Pam will be expanding on resources, process, and structure of recruiting. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Pam, thank you for being here. Would you please like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Ashley. Hi, my name is Pam McIlvaine. I'm the CEO of Diversity MBA and the recent author of The Skinny on Diversity Recruiting. Best practice trends in recruiting and diversity strategies. So I'm excited to be here with you today and engage in a dialogue about what we can do with recruiting resources.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. My first question for you is, can you explain the current trends in resource allocation and how companies should be budgeting if they want to successfully recruit diverse teams?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I guess we do talk about that. So, when I think about the resources, one of the things we know that diversity, equity, and inclusion, 90% of those budgets come out of what we call the people office, the chief human resource officer's budget or the human resource budget. And so when we're thinking about, we think about recruiting and talent acquisition and specifically diversity recruiting, which a lot of times there's either a dotted line with those budget items or it comes right out of the diversity budget. So when we're thinking about resourcing, talent acquisition, where it really aligns its strategy with diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, where you have dedicated recruiters that typically come out of talent acquisition or they come out of the diversity area and then paid for by either diversity or talent acquisition. I would recommend that organizations actually, those line items should come out of talent acquisition with a strong dotted line to diversity, equity, inclusion to best leverage the people in DE&I. Because really, those diversity, equity, and inclusion dedicated people may need to have a multiple skill set in terms of being able to intersect and engage with hiring managers. Also, we find that in budgeting, when we look at the resources around financial allocations, we found the most autonomy, that's I would consider a leading practice, is where the DEI budgets are able to stand alone, where diversity officers and departments are able to assess and really be able to create the kind of expense budgets that aligns to business, clearly the business development and clearly business outcomes, where they have their own budget goals and expense line items. I believe this then becomes, including the entire enterprise, becomes the most effective way to resource those divisions. But right now, where most of them come out of human resource departments, I believe the people side of the resources, the human capital side, should be allocated from talent acquisition with a dotted line to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I hope that made sense to you in terms of me explaining, the complexities of the budgeting process, just trying to narrow that down. Did that make sense, Ashley?
Yeah, that did. That was a nice way to explain it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, I would like to go into the process of recruiting. And it seems like recruitment processes can be overcomplicated, which hinders the results that companies are looking for. So what are your insights on what companies should focus on in order to simplify their processes?
Yeah, another good question, and where we go, do a deeper dive in the book. But to your point, yeah, the recruitment process is really, while very structured in terms of the way they're set up today, and really focused on numbers. Can we achieve these numbers? Do we have systems in place that count applications, that count candidates for hire, but not really being able to effectively measure the success process and not being able to identify biases in the process where you can eliminate those biases. So I think when I think about the recruitment process, you always want to think about from the decision part, who's going to make the decision. You have HR managers, you have people managers, you have senior leaders, you have peers that may be involved on the team. But when we look at our steps that we're talking about in terms of our recruiting application process, I like to think about it in very, very specific terms. So when you have an open job of requisition, as they're called, being able to simply say, okay, here's our open recs. How many potential applicants do we want for this rec that are qualified? Do the systems that we're identifying to use mitigate bias, or do they enhance bias in what we use? How are we both leveraging our open requisition to be used internally and externally? The next piece that I think about is identifying your application pools. Where are we going to basically requisition our application? Clearly you have your partners. Clearly you have your internal referral systems. You also have your university partnerships, as well as your organizational partnerships, and then the general marketplace with many, many different technology tools to leverage what that talent pool outreach is going to be like. Make sure you have in place your top, metrics to track. What are the top 5 metrics with all the sourcing that you're doing that you're going to track? I really think that we don't spend enough time in really paying attention to that, because the other reason around tracking is going to help us identify the biases, once again, that are embedded in talent acquisition. And then the third one is the pre-screening process, which we know is primarily systematic. For the most part, most pre-screening happens through coding. Got to be real careful with the algorithms that actually eliminate certain both ethnicities and genders. So you really have to be careful with the pre-screening tools that you use, and consider AI. As I know we're going to talk about this later, but consider, if you're going to invest in anything, consider the investment in the enhancement of the tools as it relates to pre-screening. And then your actually candidate interview. So we know today, now in the hybrid situation, candidate interviews have always been critical. However, we really gotten away from, well, let me just say this, it's really difficult to interview absolutely everyone, but the algorithms and the pre-screening process, I tell you, it's heavily biased, and we have to be careful, particularly, just because of who we have doing it. 80% of the recruiters are white Americans, and then you have an inherent lens. Not that folks mean to do something that's not legit, that's not right or validated. It's just that biases will seep through on a normalized basis. So we want to make sure that your candidate selection process is using and leveraging your employee resource groups, your reverse recruiting teams, that includes your hiring managers, recruiting panels that you create that can go across disciplines and across generations, as well as different levels within the organization. So the candidate screening process, and coupled with the requirement of diverse slates, we really want to make sure that you are in increasing the lens as much and expanding the lens as much as you can. And then finally, making the offer and understanding when you extend the offer, why they accept it. Of course, it's a good opportunity, but then if you extended the offer and they decline, why did they decline? Taking that opportunity to learn from, why we're declining, why we do not want the this particular position, so you can learn from those folks. And then the outcomes, looking at from your recruitment process, who's making the decisions, here are the 5 steps in the process, who's making the decisions, and the outcome is, you have your job descriptions, your channel, your resume selection, the final candidates, and then the new hires. And so real simple, right? A very simple recruitment process where you're looking at your open requisition, your actual, sourcing pool, your actual, your processing process, your candidate reviews, and then you're actually, making the selection. And with that, that means having the job descriptions in check, having the channels in check, the resume selection process there to identify the slate with the reviewing panels or your final candidates to make your hires. So I know I talked a little bit more about that process, but that's where actually the majority of biases sits, is in the processes of how people are selecting their candidates. So we want to do everything we can to expand the lenses of the recruiters to help them out, to expand the lens of the hiring managers to help them out, as well as to include as many people as we can in the decision-making process. So you not only hire the best talent, but you hire the talent that's going to stay with you for a while. And we mean hopefully five plus years, at least a minimum of 5. If you can get that, that's a good deal.
Wow, thank you, Pam. I think our audience is really going to appreciate that in-depth answer. It was very helpful. Moving on, you kind of talked a little bit about the technologies that companies should be focusing on. There's so many new technologies and platforms that are marketed towards helping companies, find the best talent. So I think it can be a little overwhelming to know which tools are worth it. Can you perhaps guide our audience a little bit in which tools will deliver the best results, or which tools are your favorite that you've worked with over the years?
So, well, that is a loaded question, and I'm going to call it loaded for the purpose of that, the tools are really available for the best needs that you have. So here's the reality around the recruiting tools and platforms that are available. Organizations that are really serious about engaging the best talent, particularly in this landscape of being hybrid and remote, should have no problem investing in the best AI tools or the tools that are that are out there that helps you with minimal bias to none, that helps you job select. The problem that we have, Ashley, the really problem is that people don't want to invest and spend the money. Companies don't necessarily see it as much of a priority, hence the overworking of our recruiters. So, so people, they do navigate to LinkedIn, not so much Facebook, but more LinkedIn. And I see LinkedIn as a social professional platform, but recruiters are really starting to use it as a job choice selection. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm not a fan of LinkedIn as a number one choice. Although I'm a fan of LinkedIn to help be one of your applicant pools. And I think, to get that source and that pool there, but not to be your leading tool. I do like what the investment that Indeed has done. Indeed has definitely put a little bit more oomph behind their platform. And so I think that's worth it. And that's, that's worth looking at. There's also, Yellow's YELLO. They're not too bad either. I mean, not to say that they're, any of these, none of these are really like my favorite software or good or bad, but I'm just saying they're good tools to support what you're doing. Ideal is a good one. And when you're thinking about budgets, do we need 3 or 4 of these different tools? You don't need a lot of them, but it's nice to be able to go back and forth to to have 3 or 4 to just, how is this working, for us this year, and then look at another one, have some comparative in there to see what's happening. And it also depends on the size of company. There's some companies that are small that you can leverage one platform and does really well for you. And I encourage organizations to do that. There's some that are the very large ones that are already integrated with Google. Go ahead and use the platforms that Google offers, since you're already spending all the money with them. They probably have a really good deal for you there. The other kinds of technologies that there's Carrot, and I was asking just not, there's about, there's at least hundreds of them. There's so many. And so I would say, when you're thinking about, what do we want to look at? I want to look at the ability of this platform to help me reach my talent pools. I want this platform to be able to identify key competencies and proficiencies I need for the candidate. I want it to help me with the job selection as it relates to identity. If it can help me encourage people to self-identify, both by gender, ethnicity, and identity, and that would be great. To teach that we're a safe environment. If they can provide that kind of insights, so inherently, when people come to us, they know we're an organization that's welcoming for everyone. I really, so try to ask yourself the questions that you want your platform to do, and then tweet out the ones that don't. How does this platform ensure that biases are mitigated? How do you make sure by the time it gets to me, the recruiter, that I can feel comfortable that this is a good candidate that brings all the different things I want? So when I go into the interview process, the first round, I have a good candidate that we can bring forward to our panelists and our review teams. So, so it's not just, what are the great technologies? What do I need technology to do for me? What do I need those platforms to do for me? Identify your top 5 things you want them to do. And now go source and say, who can do these at the best cost for me? Who can provide these things? And then also look at your own existing systems to see where you need to tighten up your own people management system, because one of the #1 sources should be your existing talent. You should be able to look and mobilize your existing workforce and have a tech tool that allows you to see what skills people are actually taking and enhancing. So it is a two-way street, in that you, as a recruiter, recruiting team, talent acquisition department function, should know what are the top 5 things we value in the tool, and then go out there, and look at about 10 tools and say who offers the best one, and then do your comparative analysis around cost and pricing, and then it becomes your commitment. Your commitment in terms of what the investment to the tool will be. Right now, everybody wants free. And, so what they say, what you get, what you pay for. So if you don't pay for much, you might not get much.
Well, thank you.
That's what to say to that. Huh?
Thank you, Isa. That was great.
So, I'm sorry. Were you asking a question?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so with that, I think, with the, you're asked about the resources, the structure, the process with the tools. I mean, that's pretty much what the chapter 5, in the insights in the book I'm talking in my book. So really we want people, to really, to take a deeper dive and be serious about what you're using, to help you make your decisions in hiring candidates.
Well, thank you for taking the time to help our audience understand how to build their successful recruiting plan. I hope you have a great week, and I encourage our audience to join us on next week's episode, where we're going to stay on this path of recruiting diverse talent and go a little deeper into the conversation.
And thank you, Ashley. I'm Pam McElvain, CEO of Diversity MBA Media, author of Skinny on Diversity Recruiting, available at PamelaMcElvain.com as well as on Amazon.com. Have a good day.